Hello dear viewers, thank you so much for tuning in, and today I'm very much excited to talk about Mono 1. It's a monophonic synthesizer very much inspired by the SH-101. It's an iconic legendary sound of the techno music, electronic music of the 90s. It's been used on numerous pop and electronic music records. Some of my favorite records feature SH-101. Boards of Canada, Square Pusher. It's just an incredible piece of synthesizer. It really is. So let's dive in without wasting any time. Alright, so I think one of the things I really like about SH-101 is the simplicity of the interface, the simplicity of sound design. It's very straightforward. It features just 3 waveforms which you can mix together with different proportions in the mixer, and it has noise generator as well. There is a 4-pole resonant filter and very simple VCA. I think the key to the Mono 1 sound is the envelope though. It features this very punchy, very sharp envelope which SH-101 is very much famous for, and despite it being a monophonic, it really is fantastic on all of the duties. It's great for bass, it's great for leads, it does everything really. The only thing it doesn't, it's polyphony. So let me walk you through the UI really quickly so we could talk a little bit and go a little bit of demonstration. So I've got like default preset set when you put this on your Ableton live session. And it has portamento, and portamento is really interesting on SH-101 as it features 3 modes rather than just on and off. It has a modulator, which is an LFO, and it has 4 shapes of the LFO: the triangle, the square, random, and noise. Random is basically sample and hold. And you can also sync it to your live session, and it then changes rate to basically measures. The VCO section is very much simple. It's you can send your LFO to the VCO frequency, so it creates this wobbling effect. You can also change the pulse width modulation of the square wave with an LFO, and currently it's set to LFO, so it's going to affect it. I'm going to walk through really all the functions before I go into like showing off what the knobs do. So the source mixer basically allows you to mix different waveforms that the synthesizer produces into with variable kind of amounts. And it has a square with pulse width modulation. It has a sawtooth wave and a sub, which you can set from -1 octave to -2, and as well pulse width modulated square for the sub for a -2 octave sub. It has a noise, and that's it pretty much for the mixer. That's where you get like the beginning of your sound. It also features a 4-pole resonant and saturating low-pass filter, and it's very simple, just frequency and resonance, but you also can send an envelope to modulate the cutoff frequency of the filter, or you can modulate it with an LFO as well. It also features key tracking, which basically sends the notes you're playing to the filter frequency, cutoff frequency. VCA can be modulated by a envelope or by gate. And the envelope, as I already mentioned, it's a 4-stage classic envelope, which you can change how it triggers. You can change it you can trigger it with each key press. You can switch it to legato mode, or you can sort of trigger your envelopes with an LFO phase resets, which is very fun mode, very interesting for creating the sort of rhythmical pulsating sounds, which goes along with your Ableton session well. And the output section is very simple. It's plus minus 24 dB, so you can adjust the output of your synth, and the spread is sort of a signature spread we have on a lot of our devices. In this case, it's a little bit more sophisticated, but it creates sort of, as it's a mono synthesizer, usually you will hear the sounds in the middle. The spread helps you position it a little bit wider in your mix and creates the sort of wider scene when you're playing it. It's kind of helpful for mixing. So the portamento is like more interesting than I've encountered it before. It has 3 modes. Basically on, where your notes just glide between each other. It's off, when it's just instant. And the auto mode allows you to create the sort of interesting patterns when you play or sequence it. It works in a way that if your notes are connected, the portamento is on and it will glide between the notes. But if you disconnect the notes and they sort of play outside of each range, they will just jump instantly. So if we connect notes, but if we just stop playing one of the notes and play the next one, so you can hear its sound. I think it's a very interesting feature. It's great for anyone who plays it, or if you sequence it, it allows you to create these nice sounding glides. Portamento is also, we've built into Portamento some additional feature which helps you to change the rate of the glide. So it's either constant or a variable. On the hardware, it's constant rate. So between different notes, you will have different times where it arrives to this note. We've created that you basically can switch between variable or constant rates. In variable rates, however far notes you play from each other, it will still take the same time to reach those notes. So the modulator is pretty simple. There's rates. You can switch between 4 different wave shapes. So right now it's triangle, square, random, sample and hold. There is noise. And there are a couple of features which we've added, which is not on the original. So first of all, you can retrigger the phase of the envelope. Retrigger the phase of the LFO and start with the beginning of the phase. So you can see this on little dot matrix screen. It sort of jumps to the beginning of the phase. And you can also change the phase, the starting phase of the envelope. So if we put trigger, you can see it starts at different phases. So you can hear there's difference in there. So with random, it's basically random sample and hold, which you can use in a variety of ways by sending to the filter or to the oscillator frequency as well. It creates this fun randomness in some sources. It's not particularly musical, you can't control it really well, but it creates this sort of interesting effect which you can use to your advantage. And the noise creates a texture, an interesting texture on top of your sound. You can send it again to the filter or to the oscillator frequency and sort of creates this interesting effect. Let me play a little bit with different sources and to demo this a little bit. So let me start with the triangle. So you can hear it sort of wobbles, the sound wobbles, the frequency of the filter also changes and sort of goes into, with square, it's more sort of rhythmical. If we turn the sync on, it's going to be sort of changing along the sound, and yeah, it's very nice. All right, so With random, it's completely random, so let me up the rates a little bit so you can hear the changes more frequently. Alright, and the noise adds just to texture. Right, so let's move on. So as I said, Modulator allows you to send LFO, or the output of the modulator, to several sources. So first is the VCO frequency, so it changes the pitch of the oscillator, and the other one is the filter LFO, which kind of modulates the filter cutoff frequency. It's done with this knobs, or rather faders, with this icon of the LFO. So one of the features of the VCO, which I'm going to talk about a little bit more, is the pulse width modulation on the square wave. I think in a lot of ways this is sort of the signature sound of the SH-101. So I'm going to demo this on this, just using the square wave. Let's push it up. So right now there is no modulation on the pulse width. Right now it's just playing a square wave. So let's listen. Alright, so if we turn and we start to up a pulse width modulation fader, and let's see what happens. So you can hear it sort of creates this phasing effect, which I think a lot of musicians love. I do as well. It sounds great. But you can also modulate the pulse width with just manually moving the fader, and find a position you really like for the sound to be. And you can also create modulation with an envelope. So you can create those interesting patterns, interesting dynamics in the sound. So moving to the source mixer, as I said, it allows you to mix different wave shapes together. It's a square, a saw, and a sub. So let's listen to just a pure square. I'm gonna move the cutoff frequency to the middle. So let's add a sawtooth. Let's add the sub. Have a pitch. All right. So, as I said, you can switch sub to be -1 octave, -2, or -2 with pulse width modulated wave shape. So let's listen with -1. And you can mix those wave shapes in different proportions. It's a very interesting sort of exercise because you can find a sound you really like for different occasions. So Sawtooth create this sort of sharp buzzing sound. Sawtooth, especially filtered, Square Wave, especially filtered, sort of creates the siny effect. And the Sub just adds a lot of weight to the overall sound of the synth. I think Sub sort of what makes it very much interesting for me. It also has a noise generator, which just sounds like a really simple noise. It sort of adds texture to the sound, to the overall sound. I really like it. If you add noise to the filter cutoff as well, it's going to sound even a little bit dirty. Alright, so let's move on to the VCF. And I guess it's what everyone's interested the most. Does it sound like SH-101? And I'm gonna make comparisons between the hardware and the software. It's just a little bit inconvenient right now, so I'm gonna do this a little bit later. I'm gonna record those so you can hear the difference. In my opinion, it's marginal. Like it mostly comes down to not properly matching the faders sometimes, and between how faders positioned here and on the hardware. But I gotta be frank with you, I've had two of those in my studio. I had two SH-101s, and I had troubles just matching those two together because there is a big difference in faders, in capacitors. They dry out, so the sound is even different in seemingly though similar kind of fader positions on the two different units. So I don't expect to match them perfectly, but again, in my opinion, the difference in sound is really, really marginal. So let's go back to the VCF. It is a 4-pole resonant saturating filter, and one of the interesting feature which I like is it basically, the sound of the filter really depends on how hard you push the oscillators. It's gonna sound different with just one. And if you push 2 into the filter, it starts hitting this saturation thresholds in the filter, so it's gonna sound kind of crispier and dirtier. It really does change the sound depending on how much of the signal you mix into it. So let me just swipe through it so you can hear how it sounds, and then I can talk you through it. Let's add a little bit of resonance. You can hear there's sort of a voltage drop, but it sounds a little bit sharper. That's how resonance works. Let me actually play a bass line so you could hear it a little bit. And it actually self-oscillates, so if you push the resonant far enough, it's going to self-oscillate, creating the additional sine wave based on the filter cutoff frequency. So let me... So the trick with self-oscillation, I think it's pretty useful, and you can create a lot of fun effects with it. So if you want to add like a sine wave to it, I think that's an interesting sort of design choice you can do. So let me just show you some tricks. So if you put all the oscillator levels down, so obviously there's no signal should come into filter and should just be silent. So you can see it's silent. But if you increase the resonance, which then sends the filter into self-oscillation, it's going to produce a sine wave. And right now the sine wave is modulated by the envelope and by the LFO. So you can hear it's a clean sine wave. And you can actually play it with a keyboard if you want. So let me show you. So that's a very popular, neat trick you can do. I personally really like it. But yeah, that's how it sounds with a resonance all the way up. So let me talk about the modulation on the filter, which I think is the key to sound design. So you can open a filter, or rather change the cutoff frequency with an envelope, and it's going to, even if it's fully closed, it's going to send the cutoff frequency up, and it's going to open up the filter, and it's going to create this sort of effect of the sort of the bass, or rather transient, with like sound going off after a while. With this fader, you can increase the amounts. This fader, as I mentioned, it sends the modulator output to the cutoff frequency, and it will modulate the filter, create this swelling effect. And the last one is the key tracking, and the key tracking is very useful because it allows you to modulate the frequency, the cutoff frequency of the filter with the notes you're playing. So usually when you have a fixed frequency on your filter, you can hear the low notes, but the high notes are going to be too high for the higher notes to be kind of clearly heard. So let me show you. So bass sounds fine. If you go to the higher octaves, the sound becomes like really low. It's because filter is pretty much closed. So what you can do is to add key tracking. So then the voltage from the keys will be sent to the filter, and it will open filter more on the higher notes, so you can hear them more consistently. So you can't hear it with this setting, but you can start to hear them with key tracking more up. Alright, so the VCA is very simple. It's either opened by the envelope or the gate. And the last bit is the envelope, which I think is the heart of the synthesizer. It has 4 stages: attack, decay, sustain, and release. And I think everyone's familiar with that. Attack is the sound sort of time it takes for the envelope to get to the max voltage. Decay, it defines the time it takes for the envelope when it reaches the highest voltage to go to the sustain voltage. Sustain is the level where envelope stays when you play the key, and release is how quickly the sound decays after you release the key press. So let me just show you different positions. So decay is how quickly it sort of decays while you're holding the key to the sustain level, and sustain level is about 50%, so it's going to play like half the volume. So you can hear there's a quick sort of sharp hit with the initial attack, and then it comes back to the sustain level with sort of very quick kind of decay. And if I remember correctly, attack at the maximum setting sets the attack to about 4 seconds, decay about to 15 or so seconds, and release is about 20 seconds, so at the highest positions. So as I mentioned, sustain kind of sets the level of the envelope while you're pressing the key. And you can actually open and close the filter with it as well. And release is pretty simple. It's just how long it takes for the sound to decay completely. So it's going to be very sharp at low settings. So let me show you different modes for the envelope. There are 3 modes how envelope is triggered. The first one is gate end trigger. So every time you press the key, anytime you press the key, the envelope is re-triggered all the time. The second mode is the envelope is only triggered by the reset of the gate, which means it's essentially legato mode. So when you hold the key and you press another key, the envelope will not be re-triggered, only note change will happen. So there's no re-trigger. In the gates end trigger, it's going to re-trigger all the time. All right, the last mode is very interesting because it does 2 things. First, when you press the key, the LFO phase is reset. So if we set the LFO to something slow, and go into this mode, you can see the LFO is reset to the initial position all the time. Why is that? The thing about this mode is that every time the LFO resets, while you're holding the key, it will re-trigger the envelope as well. And this is interesting effects for a really rhythmical playing. So it sort of creates this rhythmical re-triggers on the envelope when your key is pressed. And you can also, since you can reset it, your playing creates this sort of particular rhythmical pattern. The secret to this, I think, is that you can sync your session to the Ableton session. It works great with a free roaming LFO, but it sort of allows you to create various rhythmical patterns if you use in this mode with an LFO synced to your Ableton session. Let's talk about the last but not least thing of this synth. I'm going to talk about spread. I'm going to demo it a little bit and kind of walk you through, because I think it's pretty fascinating thing. I don't think you would be able to do this in analog, or it would take a huge lot of components. But digital makes it sort of possible in such a nice way. So let me walk you through that. So in the counterclockwise position, you get the full mono. It's straight in the middle. However you play it, it's just straight in the middle, very upfront. So as you increase the spread, there are a bunch of things happening. First of all, the synth, the oscillator becomes a little bit out of tune, but not noticeable enough so you can hear the pitch difference, but it sort of spreads them around. The notes which you play also positions and balances across the mix, so the lower notes will be on the left channel and the higher notes will be on the right channel. There is a setting which allows you to increase this spread or decrease this spread, and also adjust the center note around which everything happens. I'm going to show it to you a bit later. So let me show you how it sounds. So there are a lot of things happening, really. I would struggle to kind of go through all of them, but it sort of allows you to position the synth on the stage wider if you need it for your mix. So the last thing is the secret panel, which we actually have in all our devices, and here it's more exposed. It's a panel which exposes a bunch of controls, which increases or kind of allows you to do more if you're playing it live. And let me walk you through this a little bit more. So I mentioned this before, portamento rate is a thing which I was able to add. It creates variable constant portamento rate. So let me increase the portamento to demo this. Let's go about half. So at variable portamento rate, what this means is when the notes are distanced from each other at different kind of intervals, the time it takes for portamento to reach the note is going to be the same. Even if the notes are really far, it's going to be the same time. So let me show you. With constant rates, it's like on the original, it just uses the same rates while reaching the note, so the further apart the notes, the more time it will take for the notes to reach them. Alright, so that's pretty straightforward. Pitch wheel. If you're playing it live on a controller or on a keyboard, it allows you to change how much the VCO frequency is modulated. Alright, and if it's at 0, it does nothing other than opens the filter. So this is the setting of modulating the filter cutoff frequency to with the pitch wheel as well, so you can hear it as I played it previously. Alright, so you can add it, and there is also quantize, which quantizes the pitch wheel to a specific number of notes. So let's say if you want to play 7th, if you want to play like 5th, there it is. So envelope, the two things there. So you can sort of change the amplitude of the envelope in the attack position. What this means is initially the default setting is 1 volt, which it matches the hardware, but you can increase it to 1.4 volts, which means the attack of the envelope, if you have it open the cutoff, if you have it open the filter, or if you have it modulate the pulse width, it sort of goes further than on the original. And why is it useful? And also on the VCA. Why is it useful? Is you can basically create a little bit more distortion, a little bit more sharpness on your attacks, which makes the sound a little bit different. So let me show you. So that's that, and how much velocity affects the envelope is here as well. So when I just play it, no matter how much what velocity is, it's just going to be at maximum velocity, which is how it is on the hardware, but you can change that. You can send velocity to the envelope, so it's gonna the pressure I hit the notes with is going to be reflected in the output. So you can hear there's a volume differences with my change of velocity. And one of the things we've added as well is the MPE and Aftertouch support. And there are several destinations you can send your MPE to. And I'm going to show you, I'm going to switch the sync off, because if the LFO is synced to the tempo, the MPE LFO modulation won't work. It will only work on a free LFO on the if the LFO is free running. So let me show you that. So right now I'm modulating the cutoff frequency of the filter with movements on the pads of my push 3. So pulse width modulation is modulated with pads as well. And I guess the most fun one is the LFO. So you can, with your finger position on the pads, you can change the LFO rate, which I think sounds really cool. And the Aftertouch is classic. Basically, you can send it to VCF and change with your pressure. When you already hold the key, with the pressure you send to the key, you can modulate the frequency, you can modulate the resonance, which is something I've been trying. So harder hit will increase the resonance and will create this sort of swelling effect. The VCF and the envelope as well. The sustain will change with the how hard I press on the key, so it will ease up. So you can hear the VCA is driven by the envelope, and as I press harder, it sort of sends the envelope further into the VCA. Alright, so I've already mentioned there's a spread. You can change a couple of things. So you can change the width, how the notes are spread, and you can change how far the notes kind of spread in between lefts and rights if you send it like if you play it with low notes and high notes as well. And you can also set the center position of it. So let me show you really quickly how it sounds. So I'm going to increase the spread. So let's go. So you can hear the note is now played on the right channel, hopefully. and the higher notes play on the right channel. Alright, and you can set this spread or the width however you like, and you can set the center depending on your sequence. And the last bit in this panel is the serial, and it sort of defines the tolerances and differences between left and right channel. So if you have them matching like that, like almost matching, so it's sequenced serials, the sound between left and right channel is going to be almost identical. There is some difference just because it's sort of how I feel it would sound better, but if you completely randomize it, it creates basically a completely different synth. So you can find the serial numbers you really like, because each number affects a number of parameters inside the synth, so you can make it more kind of wider, and you can even it can sound unique to the serial number which you've chosen. So the differences are subtle, but they're there, and I kind of like it. You can leave it to default if you want, if you kind of want it to be really consistent across all sessions, but you can play around and find the ones you really enjoy. And those are going to be different for left and right channel, so it's like having two different synthesizer playing for the left and right channel. I want to mention special thanks to my friends Geertz and Volts from Erica Synth from T Studio, who actually trusted me with SH-101, and I had two, and it's super helpful to have two, because you can't judge on one if it's sort of supposed to sound and work this way, so having two is incredibly helpful. I use them both. So essentially when you playing this software synth, you're playing one of those synth from Erica Synth or from T Studio. So thank you guys, it's been huge help. I really appreciate it. You're the best. Alright, so the last thing I'm gonna do is compare hardware and software a little bit. I don't know if I'm gonna record the kind of more video comparing the two, because matching those faders is really finicky, really difficult. I'm gonna say this: if you have an SH-101 at your home and you play it, you're gonna be right at home with Mono 1, because I've been working hard to match those faders exactly like they are on the hardware. But as I mentioned, the sort of hardware ages, and over time the values change, so it's rather difficult to make sure they match. So let me just give you a quick demo so we can hear the comparison, hear if they sound similar, what are the differences. So I'm here to demo some differences. So I've already matched some of the faders, and we'll move them around to see. So you can see these faders are exactly the same as they are on my screen. So let's see now. So channel 4 is the hardware and channel 1 is the software. So let's adjust the frequency. Let's go to this, about half. So my resonance needs to be a bit up. So let's change the VCO pulse width modulation source. So mine should open. All right, so let's open it a little bit less. Let's remove the sub. There's some variance here. So let's see if the self-oscillation kind of sounds the same. All right, it's pretty close. Let's change something else. Let's add a little bit of modulation on the fills. So thank you so much for staying with me. It's been a long walkthrough. Hopefully you like Mono 1. I'm really excited to see you guys use it. I'm really excited to hear your comments. Don't hesitate to share your opinion. I really always read everything on my Instagram. So if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. The Mono 1 will also have a really detailed manual for you to go through if you want to learn the ropes, if you want to understand SH-101 a little bit better. And yeah, hopefully it goes well. And thanks so much, and see you soon. Thank you. Bye.